Hey,
Hey, there you are. Let me get
how are
some music
you?
going. I'm good. Sorry, it's so dark here. I just moved into a new house and I haven't gotten all the lights installed yet.
No worries. I've got the UO background here, as you can probably see.
I
Uh,
like it.
just because I'm in a bit of a messy office at the moment.
And you're setting the tone, which is nice.
Yeah. But thanks a lot for taking some time to have a chat with me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for asking me. I hope that I can contribute something that will be considered helpful.
Yeah,
I
well,
guess if you could too, just tell me a little bit about kind of like what you're putting together, just so I kind of have a good feel for what I'm walking into here.
yeah, sure. So I do a bit of freelance writing, mainly on Medium at the moment. And I've sort of written about all sorts of mainly PC gaming topics
Mhm.
for years. And at the moment, I'm making a series called Ancient Worlds. And what I'm doing is focusing on MMOs in that sort of first generation that are still
Okay.
out today. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm really interested in games like Ultima Online and EverQuest and Asheron's Call that seem to still have this really dedicated, active community. And these are games that have
For
been
sure.
for 25 years or that sort of thing. And I just in the games industry, you often see games, if they're not the latest thing, they sort of tend to peter out. And I just want
Hmm.
a perspective of what it is that drives the interest, particularly from the players side of things. So
Cool.
I hit up a couple of the Discord chats, and someone mentioned your name, and
Hopefully that's a good thing. I'll take that as a compliment on their
yeah.
behalf.
So how long have you been playing Ultima Online?
Well, I basically played from like midway through high school up into which was about like 1998, and then I kind of stopped playing at about 2004, 2005. So I haven't played the game for a
Yeah,
very long time. I did because I wrote two books in this
yeah,
Braving Britannia series, and for the second book, I decided that like because I finished the first one and I was like, well, what the hell else am I going to write about to fill a whole nother book? But the demand was
yeah,
there, and I knew people wanted to read more, so I was like, I got to do something. So I actually went back and played the game for the first time in like 15 years, and that was kind of the whole basis for the second book.
yeah. Okay. How did you
So
find
it,
going back to it after that sort of time?
um, well, it's like the my main takeaway from it was that the first time that I had played it, because I mean I played it religiously. Like I was one of those people that basically like lived on the game. I
Yeah,
grew up in a really small town. There wasn't anything to do. There wasn't anywhere to go. I lived out in the middle of nowhere, so it was like that was my window into the larger world
yeah,
essentially. And so I was meeting people from all over, different countries, and it was just like a really cool social experience for me because that's not something that I had where I was. Um, and so then to go back 15 years later and, with like rose tinted glasses on, it still was a great game. Like I still really enjoyed playing it. But the
yeah,
main thing was that like, I just didn't have the time anymore. It just wasn't
yeah,
something that fit into my schedule. Like, I have a full-time job and I do a lot of like freelance writing and I have a toddler. So it's like, I have all
yeah,
these things that, just don't really let me, get into like an MMO because, I'm the type of person that like if I'm going into something, like I want to go all in on it. And so part of me was like having to restrain myself from getting sucked back in. And
yeah,
part of it was like, I'm gonna do the as much as I can. So it was like maybe I was gonna play it for like 2 hours a day. So yeah, it just the experience just wasn't the same because I couldn't play like I would play all night when I was a kid. Like I would be on
yeah,
that thing till like 3 o'clock in the morning, and here I was playing at like noon when nobody else was online. So it was it's just a totally different experience and still fun, but just not it was never going to live up to what I remembered it as being.
yeah. Do you think that that's sort of maybe something that um, most players would experience with MMOs more generally? Is that they are so time consuming that maybe that's why the player base drops off? Is
Probably. I mean, I would guess that, especially a game like Ultima Online, it's like you can credit that directly for bringing a lot of people into relationships and marriages and
Yeah.
families and such. And it's like at that point, especially this is a common theme with people that I interviewed for the books is that, they married the person they met in the game and then didn't have time for the game anymore because they went into, married mode essentially. So sure, there's a lot of obviously catering to nostalgia, like we saw it with World of Warcraft Classic, and
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
be interested to see like what the retention rate is on something like that. Do people play it for like a couple weeks and go, okay, I got that feeling that I wanted to have, and now I'm done, or are they still going? A
Yeah.
year later or however long it's been. I would just be curious to hear
Well,
about that.
I know I went back to Classic, well, Classic
Okay.
itself, and yeah, played it on and off for a couple of years. But yeah, I'm
Okay.
in a similar boat, less time, and
Mhm.
yeah, MMOs are definitely something that chews up that time.
Yeah. Well, how did you feel, I guess, like going back for the classic experience? Did it do what you wanted it to do? What did you take away from it?
It is, and I wonder if you've probably found this maybe with Ultima Online, is that um, when I first played WoW, it was in the days before Facebook, before
Hmm.
the social media, and so the game was in itself a sort of social media. Um,
Yep.
it was fresh to everyone, so there wasn't that, people didn't have that idea of how to the optimal path through the game, and so
Right.
Classic came back. I think the player base they knew the game inside out, so it was a very different experience. And I wonder if have you sort of found over time that maybe players sort of optimize the fun out of games, or
Yeah, it definitely seems like people just want to get in there, and if they're not in there for the social aspects or maybe like the crafting or decorating
yeah,
aspects, like it seems like people just are in there to get the best items possible, and whether that's for, their own personal notoriety or their own, to fill some sort of void in their life, or if they're, then selling that item to make either real world money or in-game money. That seems to kind of be what people are doing. Like I'm part of a couple of UO Facebook groups that I was just
yeah,
using for research purposes, and a lot of times it ends up feeling kind of like a marketplace, like, oh, I have this
right,
really rare item,
yeah,
who's the highest bidder on that. And then the other thing that I ran into when I went back after 15 years is like it felt like everybody that I would come across in the game, like nobody would talk to me. And I don't know if
right,
that's because part of me felt like they weren't even at the keyboard because they were just repeating like the same actions over and over and over. So I was like,
yeah,
okay, this person is just like macroing while they're at work or something.
yeah,
So it was just kind of like, or again, though, you brought up a really great point. It's like when I was playing UO, it was the same thing. There wasn't that social media experience. So you had to be like in the moment. And I felt like maybe people were talking like on like a Discord channel or through some sort of
right,
messaging
yeah.
service. And it was just like a bunch of zombies standing around. So there was just no social aspect to the game anymore that I could see. So,
Do you
that
think
those are interesting points.
Do you think that things like Discord or social media have sort of had a net benefit in keeping the communities together, in that they've given them more opportunities to network, or do you think that they've sort of dispersed the communities a bit?
It seems like it makes it easier for folks to find each other, especially if you can remember like a character's name or what
Yeah,
server they played. I feel like now you stand the best chance of reconnecting with friends from 2 decades ago.
right.
Um, so in that aspect, I think it's great. And you can actually, back then too, it was like the person that you were playing with or the group that you were playing with, they were whoever they said that they were. Like you couldn't validate that, they
Yeah.
were that gender or they were that age. And now there's a little bit more like checks and balances. So I think it's harder to like maintain like an anonymity if you're going to play with other people online. You seem to be presenting more yourself than a particular character.
Right. Did you sort of form any real life relationships and friendships out of UO, or
I did not. I had a lot of good friends inside of the game, but the thing that made me kind of stop playing was that I went to college, and that was
Right.
its
Yeah.
own kind of
Yeah.
social experience. And I was just like, well, let me go enjoy the real world for a little
Yeah.
while. So unfortunately, no, I really lost contact with everybody. And looking back on it, as finding other people to talk to for these books, it's like I didn't even know anybody's real name, to be honest with you. Like I
Right.
knew
Yeah.
everybody by their character name, and so it's
Yeah.
like I couldn't even go about typing someone's name into Facebook to figure out like if they were okay or what they were up to or anything.
So you didn't sort of come across any of your old friends from back in the day when you came back to the game?
No,
No.
not a single person.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Um, do you have any, like, particularly from those sort of early days? I guess particularly from that right at the start. Do you have any particular memories that sort of stand out? I
Oh,
mean,
sure. I mean,
sort
I
of
what
that sort of early days. It was really the beginning of this big scale multiplayer. It must have been pretty amazing to be there for that.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those, not you don't realize at the time how kind of like once in a lifetime it is and how that will never really happen again. But I mean, I still remember the first like 30 minutes of the game that I played. And I wrote about this in the book, but I'll share it with you as well
Yeah.
if you're interested.
Yeah.
I remember like you basically you create your character, and then you kind of choose which city you want to start in Ultima Online. And so I, just randomly not knowing, I didn't know, I hadn't played the previous Ultima game, so I didn't even realize that it was connected to another series or anything. I had no
Yeah.
kind of background knowledge. So, I just dropped into this town as, wanting to be a mage who was going to save the universe from all the evil. And one of the things that I realized quickly was the game was telling me, okay, in order to raise your majory score, you need these kind of spell ingredients to get more proficient. And I made the terrible mistake of starting in the only city that didn't have like a mage shop. So I was, right from the start, I'm already at a handicap. So just from kind of talking to people who were around and finding what limited information I could in the game book that it came with, I realized that I needed to get to the next town over, which was like the city of mages. So, I'm kind of look at this haphazard map that's in the game. I compare it to the one that's in the book. I'm like, okay, I think I need to go this direction. So find the road, I'm running out of town, and within just a couple seconds of getting out of the safety of the town guards, like some guy comes riding up on a horse, and I'm like, hey man, I'm headed to this next town to buy some mage stuff. And all he does is he says this really weird word. I don't realize that he's casting a magic spell, and he shoots like an energy bolt at me. I immediately die. And this is I've barely been in the game like 15 minutes at this point, and so before I know it, I'm dead. I don't know how to get resurrected. I'm like, do I have to start over? Like, was that the game? Like, do I just did I just ruin everything? So there was a lot of thoughts and feelings and emotions that were going through my mind at that time. But then eventually getting to that town, getting resurrected, getting the ingredients that I needed, and kind of learning from that experience. Because there was nothing to hold your hand. There was nothing.
Yeah.
Nowadays you have like all of these, basically they draw you a line on where you need to go and you just follow that line. There was none of that, and there still is none of that. So there was a lot of just like exploration and getting lost and kind of learning from your mistakes and collecting your battle scars as you went and trying to come out of it as like a wiser player.
Do you think some of the more modern MMOs, like World of Warcraft, for example, or any of the other sort of more recent ones, off the top of my head, the Elder Scrolls Online, do you think they lack that? Sort of, what do you think it is that they lack that sort of first generation really had?
Yeah, I do. Like,
Or
I
do
don't.
you think they lack?
Well, the thing that struck me, like I spent a very limited amount of time playing World of Warcraft. I spent a little bit longer playing Lord of the Rings Online later. But the thing that like I saw in those games is that they really like hold your hand a lot to start, which is good because you don't want to, as a new player, feel overwhelmed by the game or feel like it's too much and you don't know what to do. But like the thing that really kind of bothered me and confused me was that, it was like, okay, as part of the tutorial, you need to go and you need to kill 5 orcs. And there was basically like a line of new players, like all waiting to like kill these orcs. So like as soon as they would pop up, somebody would run in there and kill 5 and then leave. And the next person would do that. And it was just like, this is really breaking the fantasy for me. This is, this is not like something I can lose myself in. This is very clearly like going to Disney World and kind of waiting in line for my turn. So, that aspect, I guess I didn't like. I feel like the people who play these games, they generally know what they're getting into and what the experience they're walking into is. So it's like I wish that we could just kind of, you know, approach them as like, hey, this is a smart person that will, if you give enough context to, will figure out what to do next without having to, say, go here, do this. And there's a line of people over there to kind of help you get there. So yeah, I would like to see less hand holding for sure.
So you said you sort of left the game in about 2005-ish?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then came back to it later on to sort of research it for the book. What was the motivation, the drive for wanting to put together a book, or now two books for Ultima Online?
Yeah, I guess it was because it was something that I wanted to read that did not exist for whatever reason. As we are wont to do as human beings, like we like to, be part of the things that are influential to us. So, even though I had kind of moved on with my life, like every once in a while I would search online just to see if anybody like had written about the game in any type of capacity, or, that's my thing is, I'm a storyteller. I'm a writer for my day job. I work in different mediums, and so I'm always about interested in the people's stories. Like when I would meet people in the game, I would, if they were like role playing a character, I would kind of encourage them to, share more about whether they were a necromancer or an elf or whatever they were in their, in their mind. I wanted to kind of encourage that. So but I also wondered what people were doing kind of behind the screens, because I knew again that, I was here in this tiny town with nothing around, nothing happening. What position were other people in, and what was, keeping them inside of this persistent world. So I think it was just that desire to know like what, how similar are we? Even though we're all very different, we come from different places around the world. It's like we all have this common bond, but how did it affect the people behind the game? So that was kind of just, I guess, the driving factor, something that I personally wanted to know. I didn't know if anybody else would be interested. This was the type of thing where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. If it sells 20 copies, that's fine. Thankfully it sold a hell of a lot more than that, but I
Awesome.
was okay with that going into it. So it was all a very selfish thing, to be honest with you, but thankfully I would, people responded to it enough to do it all again a few years later.
I can definitely empathize with that. I think some of the best memories that I have are those sort of early gaming experiences, whether it's online with people, or whether it's just sitting at the same computer with a friend or whatever. Memories that mean a lot. And it's kind of sad to see when a game does die. I don't know if you followed Asheron's Call when it finally shut.
Sure.
And the entire player base sort of got together in those final moments, and there's some really interesting videos of watching this MMO community sort of breathe its last gasp.
Yeah.
It's amazing that the community is held together even after the game has ended. There's still Discord out there and stuff. How do you find the UO community in your engagement for the book? How did you find them in the modern community? Were they really welcoming, or was there a bit of a wall up? Or
no, the common theme is that I feel like the player base of Ultima Online, they're generally older. I'm in my mid-30s, so, and I felt like people are mostly older than me. So I think it's a way that people can kind of stay connected, but have like an activity to do together. So it's not just, okay, let's hang out in this chat room. Let's actually go, hunt some demons and get some cool prizes in the process. So it's a way to keep their fingers busy while they chat, I guess. But no, very welcoming. Like I don't think that there were any I didn't have any bad experiences when I was like interviewing people. You know, it was everyone was like, "Oh, I would love to talk to you, but I also want you to talk to my 10 friends that I have that
Yeah,
also have
right.
really cool stories." And that was great because like I could just kind of go down this rabbit hole and then find the best stories and kind of collect those. Because not, you know, everybody thinks they have a cool story, but not everybody really does. So it was like, okay, which are the ones that are going to resonate most with the readers, and what are people going to be able to relate to? But yeah, totally welcoming. You know, everybody was really great of as I was going around just like promoting the books, like people were super into helping. They wanted to spread the word. You know, just the fact, like you said, that you heard about me through a Discord channel where people were, you know, happy to kind of spread the word on that is pretty much my all around experience. And even the developers, you know, got really into it. Like Richard Garriott was a big person in helping to promote it, and Raph Koster was invaluable in helping to spread the word, and he continues to you know preach the good word of the books whenever he has the chance to do so. So that means a lot to me because they created something that has really become a huge part of my life.
Do you have much engagement with Raf and Richard Garriott at all with the book, or?
I did interview. I interviewed Raph for the first one,
Yeah,
and I interviewed Richard for the second one.
awesome.
You know, I don't talk to them normally, but
Yeah,
I'm at the point now where if I send them an email, I can get a response. So I guess
yeah,
that's
yeah,
something.
yeah. Um, I do kind of find it funny that following Richard Garriott on Twitter, and every now and then someone will say like, "Yeah, I completed Ultima One," or Ultima Four for the first time in 40 years, and he'll
Yeah,
retweet it and congratulate them in character as Lord British. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
pretty
I mean,
pretty interesting. How do you find? Did you find in those sort of early days that the developers of the game were really involved in the community as well? Or
yeah, you know, I don't think I realized how much they were until much later. Like
yeah,
there were these kind of like characters called seers that were they were basically like volunteers that would like role play different events and you know do things to kind of bring the community together. You know, looking at it now, especially because I work in game development and realizing, okay, this actually took like months of preparation to do, but you know, felt so spontaneous at the
yeah,
moment. And then you know, you're fighting monsters, and the next thing you know, like some cool looking knight comes up who's obviously like one of the developers playing the character, and you know, they're bringing you into the story, and you kind of you know, and then you walk away with this tale of this huge battle that you were part of, and you know, it feels like such a spur of the moment thing, but to see how much time they spent into just you know creating memorable events for the community, I think was just amazing, and I think a lot of other MMOs have kind of been inspired by not only
yeah.
that, but a lot of the things can be traced back to Ultima Online. I think a lot of just the fundamentals of good MMO design.
I think I definitely see that in sort of that trend of the survival crafting type.
Hmm.
So even Minecraft, I see elements
Yeah.
of Ultima Online in that. Ultima Online in some ways felt like one of the first survival crafting online games, really. So
Totally.
it's so manual when going out there and chopping wood and then baking bread or whatever. It's
Yeah.
yeah, pretty amazing from a uh, I find that the role play sort of community within UO is quite strong. Did you have
Mhm.
much interaction with that sort of, the role players?
Yeah, I wouldn't consider myself one under any
Yeah,
circumstances, which is kind of strange considering the path that I've gone on since. But I think I
yeah,
learned a lot from those folks. Oh, but you know, it was really interesting that you know, basically in the game, you could be a human,
yeah,
but you know, there weren't any other races until much later that you could choose from. But there were people who would really kind of go out of their way to like role play as a community of orcs. Like they would all you know they had a language they created, they all had
wow,
like a naming convention they would use, they would dress up like the orcs in the game, and you know if you stumbled upon them they would act as such and try to kill you as such. So to see that people had dedicated just that much time to you know kind of creating this sub community within the game and living and breathing and really staying in character, I thought that was blast. Like whenever you ran across situations like that, it really made you wonder like, is this a person or is this like you know part of the game? You know it's so hard to tell at this point. So
yeah,
you know stuff like that is just you know so cool that people would invest the time into doing that to make those experiences for people.
yeah. So you're doing writing now, and you say working in game development.
Yeah, so I work as a game writer. So I've
Yeah.
worked for several companies. Right now, I freelanced for many years. I work full time with a studio now called Magic Tavern.
Yeah.
We released a mobile game last year called Project Makeover, which was a huge hit, like
Yeah.
number one in like 160 countries. Super cool experience. And then I recently transferred off of that, and the company's doing their first Steam game. So I'm serving as lead writer for that project.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. And do you find that you sort of draw on a lot of those old experiences when you are doing your writing for modern games? Do
Well, when I can, yeah,
you
you know,
inject your
I haven't.
memories and
Yeah, I would love to work on an MMO, but at the same time, I think like I find it extremely daunting. But
yeah,
I love the idea of being able to create like emergent gameplay experiences for people and just kind of giving them the tools to then, you know, fall into these different scenarios that turn into whatever they want them to. I wish I could draw more on it, but I think the most valuable thing that I've learned is just, you know, making sure that if you're doing something that's an online experience, being able to balance that social game with the actual game, making sure the game is fun, but you still have a reason to meet other people and connect with other people and work with other people. Those are all very important.
did you have much in doing your research for the books? Did you have much interaction with players that were playing on private shards, or did you have much interaction with private shards?
Yeah, you know, I knew that that was a subsection. I kind of near the end of my Ultima Online career, I did play a few of those just to kind of test the waters. Plus, as I mentioned, I was going into college, so it was like I was like, oh, I could pay this subscription fee, or I could play over here where it's free, and they're saying
Yeah,
it's just as good. So, you know, those were definitely interesting experiences. I did interview one person for the first book, who actually ran a private server
right.
for many years, and you know, again, there have been, you know, hundreds or if not thousands of those free servers that they have a very short shelf life. It seems like about
Yeah,
after a year, they sort of fizzle out or become something else. So I wanted to represent that section of the game because I think it's very important. But I also wanted to, you know, keep the focus on the actual game and try to get people to resubscribe to the
yeah,
game
yeah,
and keep it floating for another 25 years. But the other thing that I learned is that a lot of folks who did play and maybe they quit, they do kind of go to those private servers every once in a while, or they've reconnected with old friends on those private servers. So it definitely seems like they're alive and kicking. And even though right now there are quite a few of them, you know, there are some that seem to stand kind of heads above the others as far as quality goes and active development teams.
what do you think that, I mean, when there is that sort of often relatively stable private free to play option, what do you think it is that keeps people subscribing to, the live game?
You know, I think a lot of it, and it's going to sound silly, but Ultima Online, they handled housing very differently than any other
Yeah,
MMO. And rather than like buy a house and be instanced into this like island area where there's just like a cul-de-sac of homes, you know, in Ultima Online, if you bought a house, you could put it anywhere on the landscape that it would fit. So it was cool because it made the topography of every server very different. And it seems like a lot of people really just want to make sure that their houses don't collapse. So they, you know, and again, it sounds super silly, but like they have that like, you know, almost physical attachment to this game, and
yeah,
they've owned this home for, you know, maybe it's a castle. They've owned this castle. You know, it's the only place they're ever going to own a castle. But you know, it's like there's something like if it were to fall and collapse, like they would lose a part of themselves. So I think that's what honestly keeps a lot of people, you know, subscribing and paying their $12 a month or whatever it is right
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, I guess just to wrap things up, I guess, where do you, what are your expectations for the future of UO? I mean, I know you say you don't really play that much anymore, but where do you see Ultima Online going in the next, 5 to 10 years?
That's a good question. And, you know, since kind of getting involved with these books, like, even though I don't play the game, like, I still read all of the news and I still
Yeah,
follow it because I feel like at some point there's probably going to be a third book or something else that I will work on. And so I don't want to have to like relearn the history. I would rather just follow it now because it only takes like
yeah,
10 minutes a day. One of the interesting things is that they've recently kind of announced a new initiative that they're working on called New Legacy, And for the first time in like 20 years, they're adding a new server to the game that's kind of going to emulate like old school UO, but like
Going
not
down the
in the
sort
way,
of classic route a little bit.
kind of, but
Yeah.
like, but they've said flat out, like, it's not going to be that, but we're going to take like
Yeah.
the best elements from those days and we're going to combine it with the best elements that we have now. And we're basically going to create like a seasonal server, something like you would kind of see in like Diablo, where it's going to exist for like a year. It's going to have like a self-contained story. So people can join this server and participate and kind of like make their name and earn cool rewards. And then at the end of the year, the server will like explode and reset, and players can like take that character that they went through the story with and then transfer it to another production server. So it's kind of like a really big thing that they have going on, and they're planning. They haven't announced when they're going to launch it yet, but it sounds really cool. I think it's a great idea. The main problem that I see with Ultima Online is that there are like 30 production servers at the moment. And just based off some like quick math that I did looking at like player counts and such, is that there really aren't more than like 150 people on a server at any given time. So it's like you have all these people, but they're all spread out like across, way too much land. So it's like if you can find a way to kind of bring them together, I think it'll feel like more people, it'll feel like a bigger crowd, and it'll be an interesting way to bring everyone back together who's interested in that. So from that aspect alone, I think it's really awesome.
Yeah. Do you think UO sort of, or MMOs or online gaming in general, the inevitable COVID question, how valuable do you think they've been during this sort of time?
I can only imagine, man. Like if I didn't have, if I wasn't married and I didn't have a kid, like I probably would have like just fallen into one of those worlds and lived there for the last 2 years, to be honest with you. Like I feel like it's awesome that that's a safe place that everybody can kind of remain interacting with one another. I can only imagine how much it's folks who suffer from depression or something. I'm sure that it's been a huge help to them. And I'm glad that it exists, and I really hope that having those games available have helped people through this hard time for sure. And I hope we've proven even more value. I think a lot of people see these types of video games and they think, oh, it's expensive, it's addictive, it's a waste of time. But I think there's a psychological element to it that's really important, that hopefully these past 2 years will help us be able to put numbers to somehow.
Well, Wes, thank you so much for having a chat to me.
Absolutely. I hope I gave you something worthwhile.
Oh yeah, excellent. It's been fantastic, and I've got your books on order. I can't.
Oh, wonderful! Thank you.
My hands and to have a read. But yeah, good luck with potentially future volumes of the book. And yeah, thank you so much for having a chat to me about Ultima.
Absolutely. And if there's anything, if you think of any other questions or you need me to like clarify anything, just feel free to shoot me an email and I'll be happy to help you out.
Thank you so much, Wes. And
cool,
maybe see you in Ultima Online one day.
Absolutely. You have a great rest of your day. Okay.
Thanks. See you later.